dances, I am still. Peace is my companion. Joy is my friend. The campfire, the stars, the slight breeze, the taste of the hot chocolate, and the dancing shadows are, in themselves, enough. Here I am. Why waste time wanting to be somewhere else? Join me by the campfire.
Hey everybody, Aaron Simmons here. Thank you so much for joining us on this season finale of season 1 of Campfire Philosophy with J. Aaron Simmons. I am so stoked about tonight because I'm joined by two of my favorite humans in the world, Aaron James and Nick Riggle, who have graciously agreed to hang out by the campfire tonight and talk about the way philosophy for them intersects with a life well lived. And they're also just super gnarly people. Nick, a former professional skater. Aaron, continuing to be, I guess, a kind of like pro adjacent surfer, though he's currently department chair, which means that he does probably nothing other than administrative hell work all day long.
It's all email.
So it's so cool to be with you guys. To everybody watching, tonight is a special episode. We are doing an hour. We're starting an hour early and going an hour tonight. So it is a live stream. So if you've got questions, comments, thoughts, drop them in the chat wherever you are streaming this, and we will try to engage and think with you as we go tonight. So yeah, guys, let's hop in. Nick, tell us about this idea of This Beauty. It's a book that you recently published. I've taught it in my classes. It's absolutely phenomenal. What is the idea of This Beauty, and how does it help us think about skating, surfing, camping, biking, our way to a meaningful life?
Yeah, so well, the basic idea behind the book is I wanted to write something to my newborn son, who just turned 4, actually, about what makes life worth living under the circumstances where you didn't choose to exist. You know, I chose for him. And in fact, life isn't easy. There's a lot of difficulty in it,
Right.
A lot of pain, a lot of suffering. You know, what makes it worth living under these circumstances of kind of, I don't know, existential thrownness, or maybe we don't even have to get so fancy, just you didn't choose.
Yeah.
I chose for you, and like abracadabra, here you are, you exist. And, historically, we have a lot of answers that people have tried to give via religion, emphasis on family life, certain economic conceptions of good lives. And so for inspiration, what the book does is it tries to develop an answer to that question by thinking about the social culture of kind of giving each other answers via these cliches like YOLO, right? You only live once, so embrace life. It's meaningful, it's good. But you might think, the critical philosopher thinks, well, if you only live once, then maybe you should protect this kind of delicate, precious, easily destructible thing, not jump off a cliff or, or go rollerblading or whatever. So, so the book kind of systematically looks at each kind of set of what I call them existential imperatives. Ones that address life in general, like YOLO, you only live once. Ones that address the body, like, treat yourself, or various imperatives to kind of self-care, bodily concern. And then ones that address the day, right? Seize the day. Live like there's no tomorrow. And ones that address like this very moment too. So yeah, and then over the course of those chapters, I developed the thought that the most reliable way of dealing with the question, I don't think there's really a direct answer to this question of like why you should embrace life. But I think that there's like a kind of aesthetic answer, which is, look, engage in loving beauty, like develop a connection, a kind of daily connection to loving beauty or the aesthetic or aesthetic value in general.
Right.
And that will be a reliable source of answers to the question, or a reliable way of living with this question kind of hanging over your head. And yeah, to bring it back to your theme, I mean, I think skating, surfing, certainly camping, any kind of outdoors activities, these typically are good ways of, or good sources of aesthetic connection. So they don't have to be, right? You can just camp because whatever, you're like a burly dude and you just think it's better to be outdoors all the time, whatever. Or you can camp with a kind of love of nature, a love of nature's aesthetics in mind. And same with, I think skating, I would argue I would argue, strongly or with great conviction that that skating is an aesthetic sport, really through and through. But I think, Aaron, from what I know, what I've heard you say, you'd also think of surfing in an aesthetic way.
Oh yeah, that's how surfers talk about it themselves. It's not super controversial. Yeah.
And so these
are
right. And it's like, I think it's true in surfing. It's very, very true in skating, where it's not, you can't just like do a trick. It's not like, what's your favorite trick? It's this one trick. No, it's like, it's doing any trick well, where well is essentially an aesthetic normative category. So I might like, do a switch down a kinked rail, but if my switch is all wonky and I land and I kind of wobble, like, I got down, I didn't die, but I might as well have not done it, right? I have to go back and do it again to get it right. And getting it right just means like making it my style, making it beautiful in my way. So.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about the book is this combination of, you say these phrases, these kind of, cultural linguistic norms that remind us about this sense of there is a fleeting reality to existential existence. And today, I actually wrote a Substack where I reflected on the idea of just send it, or going full send, which are, phrases that if you type in Google, you'll get, skateboard and rollerblade and surfing and mountain biking and all kinds of stuff, right? Skiing. And part of what I think is so cool about this idea of just sending it, or YOLO, or Carpe Diem, or whatever it is the sense that aesthetic sensibility, being, tapped into this beauty of the present moment, is connected to the reality of our finitude, such that there is no connection without risk. And you talk about this in the book in gritty detail. In fact, my students, like, their favorite part is, you with a gun in your mouth, basically, and things have gone sideways and a night didn't turn out the way you hoped. Right. And you kind of realizing, man, like, that could have been it. But the same's true. There's probably some tricks that you landed that you thought, boy, if that had gone a little sideways, like, that could have been bad. So how is it that
some did go sideways? Yeah.
Well, I remember when my son broke his arm skateboarding. my son broke his arm skateboarding, and I sent you a text that was like, dude, he's sitting here in the hospital. And you sent me back a video of you skating with a broken leg or arm or something.
I had
right? And I was like,
cast up to my shoulder. Yeah.
I mean, how do you connect that? Because I think this pivot's really cool to Aaron's work. But how do you connect this aesthetic appreciation with this like existential embrace of the riskiness of existence?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting question about like the aesthetics of extreme sports. Is there a relationship between the risk level and the like beauty of success or something like that? Or like, and I mean, I think there is, like back in the day, we didn't call it sending. We called it, hucking. Right. We like hucked it. We hucked it. Or we talked about hammers, right? That was a hammer, like a big trick. And what's cool about a full send is like everyone knows that there's a huge risk involved, and that the send embodies this kind of embrace of that risk with a kind of confidence and gusto that like even other people watching who could do that if they tried just find impressive. It's like, well, I know what that would take. And then when it's landed, well, and they're not only not hurt, but like they really just nailed it. Then, I mean, that's what's all about, right? It's that level of just like the kind of communal joy that brings to the people involved, the friends cheering them on. And, I feel like sends get a bit like into dangerous territory when they're just showy or something like that. You see a lot of these like diving tricks on Instagram where it's like these people are like sending like themselves off of cliffs like to do death dive in a way that just feels like just getting clicks, and it's like that's not like the joyous community of skater friends, embracing like ascend and just like cheering them on. That's not a click. That's a thing that like grows the community, progresses the sport. Like that's what it's all about, versus like this other kind of pseudo form of send that's just like social media clickbait. I don't know. Maybe I'm too negative about it, but yeah, whatever.
No, I think this is a cool pivot to Aaron. I mean, obviously you've written some more recent books, which we can certainly talk about, economics and monetary policy and stuff. But the book that obviously you wrote that connects to kind of this sense of what are the meanings of life that throw us into this embrace of risk, but not just foolhardy, callous cavalier behavior, but recognizing like we don't have an infinite amount of time. So let's make the most of the time we've got, is your book Surfing with Sartre. And in there, one of the things that you say that I think so well connects to, Nick, your idea of this ain't just about, clickbait YouTube, is the sense that when you talk about Surfing with Sartre, the whole thing for me, Aaron, is anchored in a community ethos. Like there's something about being part of this we that really does have a feedback loop. When I'm around surfers, it helps me make better sense of who I'm trying to become. So how is it that community is part of this aesthetic, this, culture of sending it, but in like quasi-responsible ways, I guess?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, this actually gets at both what I said in the book and a way I've changed my mind since the book that's now coming out in a new book project, a memoir I read that has stuff about meaning in life, an argument about meaning in life in it. But to say what's in the book, I mean, I do think there's a basic kind of meaning in the act of surfing that the surfing knows and lives by and knows really deep down. And that's a basic kind of attunement to the world, to a naturally changing phenomenon, the ocean and its waves, such that they have acquired skills to sort of constantly adapt in an attuned way to its changing dimensions, so that they get in a kind of flow. That kind of flow emerges through a set of turns and being in the pocket position, adjusting to the power of the wave in a certain way. And that brings a certain felt sense of like joy, or stoke as surfers call it, as part of an awareness, self-awareness that you're caught up in this fortunate coalescence of skill and circumstance. And then this leads, like this happens while on the wave, but sometimes at the end of the wave, grown men and women, are who doing hoots and howls of stoke just to that they're caught up in this coalescence, Right. And the way I put that in existential terms is that it's an awareness, it's a sense of that life is, that they're glad to be alive rather than not, just for this moment. It's complete in itself. It doesn't have to have any further meaning, because this is enough meaning for it to be sort of reconciled to existing. If you're wondering why be alive rather than not, if you were bummed or whatever, and this happens to you, you don't need a further answer, right? I mean, it's good enough. So I still agree with that part. That doesn't bring in the social dimension, but there's another part there is another aspect to this, which is like, oftentimes like surfers, you want to surf with friends and you want to have these peak moments like the ones I just described, especially risky, daring moments where you succeed. Like you pull into a big tube and you could easily get, hammered onto the reef, but then you come out unscathed. And by the way, a really memorable moment in my own life was in Tahiti, where I was with these friends, and you take a boat out to this reef pass, and I pulled into this really nice tube, a stand-up tube, this big round tube, and my two friends were on this boat, and they were motoring on the shoulder of the wave, surfing the wave on this boat, and looking into the tube, with me looking out of the tube, seeing them on the boat going, like this, like locking eyes while I'm in there, like this. I come flying out of the tube, and then just like coasted up to the boat. So that was like a purely social experience, right? Mutual recognition and a glorious big South Pacific, tube. So that was very memorable for the social side of it. That was like a really joyous thing. So I think that's all stuff I say. I mean, the kind of thing I say in the book that I think solves the existential problem. But so that's basic meaning that I think is the kind of thing that like Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty are after, that resolves certain kinds of existential questions. But I now don't think it's the whole story of meaning. Now I think another element of meaning is the story we can tell about the events that are in our lives or in someone else's lives. It could be big stories of the cosmos, or it could be, or a whole life, or it could be just like an afternoon, or it could be a certain wave, or it could be any period of time where there's a set of events that seem to make for an apt story that could be framed as one of serendipity, as risk-taking and failure, risk-taking and success, or foolhardiness, poetic justice, comeuppance, all these story frames. I think those are really important to us. And those are ways that we sort of meaning in life just is the aptness of those stories to events. And finding meaning is finding the stories that fit. And then a crucial function of those stories for us is basically being able to accept them as your story, so you can reconcile yourself to events having gone a certain way. And also and that's part of that is being wanting to tell your friends, like, oh, here's my story. Look, here's what I was trying to do, but it didn't go as planned. But like, look, this turned out to be a funny thing, or it turned out to be serendipitous, and then your friends all laugh, and that's just fine. So that's a way that we reconcile ourselves to tragedy or life going or failure or failed attempt. I mean, it could be that the story is just one of foolhardiness, like that connects with like the ones Nick was telling. It's not like a noble effort to do a big hammer trick and then you fail, but everybody's like, yeah, all right, good try, But the story is foolhardiness because it was just like, well, you barely lived, and if you did it just for clicks, then that was never going to be an act of skill, and that was just okay. Glad you're still alive, but that's the story at the end of the day. So I think that's meaning in life. Also, and I think that can apply it. I want to generalize that story to large scale, like a decade of life. So I'm writing this memoir about my 40s, about my charity misadventures in Sumatra, where I go surfing, and it's a story of misadventure and serendipity and love and life and charity, and so that's that story. But that's the story of my 40s. So I found a story of my 40s, and I'm like, okay, that's the meaning of my 40s, and that it didn't go as planned. It didn't. Well, not a complete success, but I like this story, so I can sort of live with that being the way my life went, and like resolves my midlife angst and all that. So that's reconciliation through the two stories. Small versions would be, surfer. I just got a great wave. Nobody saw it, but I go and tell everybody. We're talking. We like surfers is like a lot of the surfing together. Half of it is like talking about what just happened, getting together, having drinks or beers or food, and then recounting the waves, the days of events. That might go on through dinner the next day until there's a new session, and then you do that all over again. So that's very short time frames. But then, like on people's deathbeds, they're wondering what's the meaning of my life. If they have a story like, oh, I hit a hole in one. If that's their story about what they did in life, you might feel like, well, that's pretty awesome, but I don't know if that has something to do. Whereas someone else has got a better story, maybe, or maybe someone doesn't have any story. That can be okay too. And then the desire for a cosmic story that is just like, does the events that have all occurred or will occur, does it support any grand narrative that we could sort of relate ourselves to? And maybe it does, maybe it does in some way. You could argue about that, but that's the narrative conception allows for that. It just doesn't require meaning in life to be connected with grand super cosmic narratives that we have to all fit into, because they can just be in the small, the daily, the weeks, the decades. But I think that's meaning in life too, a really crucial part of it.
Wow.
Anyway, that's
really cool. I can't wait to see the new book. I mean, it's interesting the way you describe this, because in my own contribution to this sort of, hey, let's all go do gnarly things and reflect on existential existence, camping with Kierkegaard, the way I try to frame the two general orientations we can take toward living, on the one hand, is what I call success orientation, which both, Nick, sounds like how many likes are you getting? How many clicks are you getting, right? The meaning of this behavior, this life, this existence is all about external applause. And in the same way, Aaron, it's like if that one hole in one is the meaning of your life, it was a success narrative. That then is a box checking kind of thing, but that's hardly going to sustain you as minutes keep moving forward, right? This beauty of the next minute where you're heading home because it's raining and the hole in one was an hour ago. And so I suggest an alternative orientation that I just call faithfulness, which is grounded in both Kierkegaard's idea of faith, but also Sartre's notion that we can be in good or bad faith. There is no kind of faithlessness. It's just that you're denying the real task that's up to you about how you live and why it matters. And I love the idea of that being a kind of storytelling enterprise, that we are faithful when we are invested in telling a story that we're cool with continuing to tell, and others in some sense are invested in hearing and then thinking about their own lives as a result, right? And so it's fascinating to me that both of you, and maybe me as well, like all of us are saying there's a problem with living when it's just about achievements, trophies, checking boxes. There's something compelling about living when it's a matter of living in order to keep doing this well, which connects, I think, to, Socrates. The idea is that we live a meaningful life as a task of living itself, right? So, Nick, when you reflect on now being a dad for a minute, right? You're back to like sleeping fairly regularly, I hope.
Well, I have 2 kids though.
Oh.
2 kids. Yeah.
So you threw yourself back into the mire that is infancy.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that do you live differently now than before you had kids? Like, is there a story maybe we tell in our 20s that is just a different kind of story, even though they're both faithful?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, wow, I'm willing to take different risks now. And the way that I relate to this minute, it's gonna look different. I'm not gonna huck or send in maybe the same way. Like, how has that shifted for you as a result of being a parent?
A lot. I mean, I think about my time differently. Like, my time is so limited. I get a lot of meaning out of my writing. And even with one kid, I was able to write quite a lot. I could write on the weekends pretty regularly because the one kid would take one long nap and there wasn't quite as much laundry to do and cleaning to do. And now it's like, I find it super hard to find time to write. So I'm actually, concentrating my efforts a lot more. I used to work on 5 things at once and kind of, wake up in the morning and like pick which one felt right and work on that and then move to another one. Now it's like one thing at a time, and it's between the hours of 9 and 4 when I'm not teaching and not in a meeting and not doing a committee thing and not answering emails and not fixing the car and not, playing tennis or working out at the gym or whatever, old man activity I'm up to. So it's a lot harder to get work done. And so I have to find other sources of meaning, or just like, be, I think, so focused that I get the juice out of my research. But it's, again, hard to be that focused. Like, parenting's super tiring. I have so they're like almost 2 and 4. So like, it's a lot. So one thing there's 2 things that I think I put more emphasis on now, which kind of integrate into family life better. Which one is just cooking. I've been cooking like not my whole life, but for a long time. I'm a seasoned chefy dad.
Nice.
And so I do get a lot of meaning out of that, but also been making wine, so I'm like getting more into that. So like helping out with the harvest, around this time in the area, mountains over in Julian, and just trying to do that. And that's nice because it's something I can involve the kids in it, and it takes a long time, so it's always kind of something you can kind of like tinker with. And so those are a couple of things, but still getting some decent writing done.
I love it. I mean, Aaron, so you as we mentioned earlier, are department chair, which like I send you my condolences, I guess. I mean, that's a thing that I think is noble, and obviously it's a necessary event for making communities thrive and flourish, that we have to step into those roles. But that obviously probably comes with lots of these sacrifices of doing what you wish you could do for doing what you have to do. How do you like navigate that tension? Because again, in Nick's case, it sounds like, Nick, you've just found ways to say, well, there are some other really cool things that I can make time for that facilitate doing these things that are where I'm at in this life stage.
Yeah.
But Aaron, like, I mean, do you, I guess my worry is an awful lot of people, I think, spend the majority of their midlife in particular telling themselves, if I just do what I have to do eventually, then later I'll do what I want. I'll find meaning. I'll be able to get back to joy. But it seems like you're somehow navigating that necessity with also living on purpose and finding this beauty of the present moment. How does that play out in your life, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing that was kind of liberating about this writing this memoir, it was a weird thing. I finished a draft of the memoir, and I know I have to fix stuff, but it was liberating just to like have it done. Like that was my story, and then but one thing that as I finished it, I was thinking through some of the ideas in it and then applying them now and then rethinking life to some degree. But one thing that was kind of liberating about it was just things that I say in the thing, which is that of just not living or having very loose ideas of what success is or what goal your aspirations are. That in some sense, the goal or the meaning in life doesn't emerge because you've succeeded or not succeeded. I mean, one thing, if you don't or partially succeed, you can reinterpret things along the way. But even going into it, the meaning is the meaning is the story that unfolds because of the way things play out, the way events play out. And that meaning happens sort of whatever the outcome. So you can do things for their own sake because they're inherently meaningful. And as you go, just appreciating like great stories that emerge. I mean, this is like how we live. Where you talk with friends, like, look, this thing happened. This is hilarious. Da da da. You know, like this is just a lot of what brings a lot of joy in our lives.
Yeah.
So, but thinking like, you know, I'm doing this thing, and we'll, you know, who knows whether it'll work out or when I'll finish this book or whatever. But you know, it gives you a much bigger emphasis on the process and the value of the process, and the meaning emerges in the process. And it's a way of thinking of like, what's the life I will have lived after this process? Not like what goal will I attain? You know, like will this make for an awesome story? Will it be one that I can feel like, oh yeah, I'm glad that is how my life went. That's how it worked out. Even if didn't go according to plan, that can still be an awesome story. It can be still something you're like happier. I mean, a lot of the things, this is probably true of Nick as well, but both of us are the kind of people that like our lives, I think, Nick, it's true of you, but life went better than if you planned it when you were 20. Like, things worked out like kind of surprising ways, you know, and like, so you can kind of, and you do that when you're on vacation as well. I think like if I'm traveling for a month or whatever, I often don't have like a stacked itinerary because you don't know what to plan for, right? What to expect. So you're just letting, you know, just being in a place and letting, as it were, the story unfold as you go. And then you're often like in retrospect, you're like, wow, that's so much better than if I'd read a travel guide and done a meticulous plan. Because look at all these surprising things. Everything that was wonderful about this trip to wherever, you know, emerged that way. And so I think I've always had the idea that like you could live life as a journey or on a vacation because I'm super happy on vacation. I can just live that way. Why not just live that way? And I think I'm clearer now about how to do it now with this story.
That's awesome.
Based idea.
Yeah, I mean, the first step is not to be department chair, I think.
Well, I can tell stories about what I'm doing that help me go. You know, but yeah, it doesn't interfere with my goals.
I've just been thinking about that, what you just talked about, because I spent a week in Budapest in late May, and I had some things I had to do there academically, but had a lot of free time, and I was by myself, and I haven't had that long alone in a new city in, I don't know, a decade, maybe a decade and a half. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking a lot about that because I actually just ended up walking through the city every day and wandering around. I had a couple of things in mind about potential things to do, but I didn't even really look many of them up. I would just kind of like wander and like, oh yeah, there's that weird museum that I heard about, and kind of like, you know, wander in. And so after a week of doing that, like I was kind of on the flight home, kind of piecing it together and thinking, yeah, it was so nice the way things unfolded. You know, I think I was having exactly those kinds of thoughts.
Yeah.
Describing it.
I love it.
Well, beautiful city too.
See, I feel that way about mountains. I just got back from Snowshoe, West Virginia, was doing some downhill mountain biking there, and things went sideways. I ended up in the emergency room and messed up my ribs and shoulder and thought I had shattered my hand, but thankfully it was all soft tissue. But Aaron, I today was talking to a student of mine who's a kind of semi-pro enduro mountain biker, and for like an hour, we just talked about the story of my crashing in Snowshoe. Like it was all we needed for that lunch to be absolutely, as Nick, you would say, awesome. And it was chill. Just even though it went wrong, even though it wasn't what I had hoped would happen, in some ways, the experience was less good because I ended up in the ER instead of, shredding the trails. But the story was way better because now I had something. It's like, yeah, it was awesome. I had a great time, as opposed to, dude, this one rock garden, didn't have enough speed. So I get this idea that if the outcome is the goal, then our agency actually becomes minimized. But if the investment is the point, that's where the meaning happens. And whatever the outcome is, this is probably going to yield a pretty cool story, and it's going to allow for connection, allow for engagement. That seems like a much better way to approach where we are. It's like the writer Anne Lamott says, you have to be where your feet are. And the way I tend to describe this, drawing on Kierkegaard, is, are you okay with who you are becoming? Because that's a question of, if you aren't, then change stuff. And it's not just the outcome of the self I will have been. It's the only way I can become who I hope to have been is to right now be invested in that. It has to be this life task, this, as a dad, I keep thinking well, what am I teaching my son about who he's becoming? And we say all the time to each other, I don't care if you're rich. I do care that you're kind. Because kindness is not I did it. I've now hit my first, kindness million. I'm out. It's always, no, I'm only kind insofar as I'm continually showing and enacting and invested in kindness as a virtue. So, yeah, I think what y'all are saying makes tons of sense. A couple questions came in. One, to my buddy John Sanders. Yes, I think I could approach being department chair as allowing my colleagues to catch their waves. That said, I'm fairly hesitant to do so, because what I worry is that I would be a chair in ways that just makes everybody angry instead of facilitating their flourishing. So you got to know your own limits, maybe. And to Bonsai, yeah, when I talk about worthy of our finitude, and that's the question I ask about, are we okay with what we're doing? Well, is it worthy of the finitude that I have? I think Kierkegaard does affirm some kind of immortal soul, but he says very clearly about selfhood that we are a nexus of the finite and the infinite. And so the only way to live toward something like eternity is to enact being worthy of that at every instant. It's like Levinas says at one point, the only way we could be worthy of the coming of the Messiah is to live like there was never a Messiah going to come. We have to be present on purpose right where we are. So hopefully that addresses a couple of questions. Thank you all so much for thinking with us. Again, drop them in the chat and we'll get you drawn in. So one of the things, Aaron, that you've done recently in another book that I have gotten a lot of use out of is, you say when we think about, shredding the waves, this throws us into a kind of political philosophy. We've got to think about how do we, and this goes to John's question, facilitate agency for others. And one of the things you do in this book, Money from Nothing, is rethink all kinds of specifics, which we don't have to get into, but I'm fascinated by the idea that even something like monetary policy becomes now not just an esoteric, abstract, detached kind of thing. This is the kind of practical thinking we do when we are invested in saying, hey, Nick, let's go skate together. And you're like, dude, I'd love to, but I'm working 4 jobs to pay for healthcare for my newborn. This isn't possible for me. And so how is it, to both of you, we'll start with you, Aaron, rethinking social policy and practices becomes part of what it looks like to live on purpose, live meaningfully, while invested in letting others have that same kind of flexibility, that same kind of investment option?
Yeah, I guess this is one way to think about it, is this book it's about money and public finance. But it's a way, it follows on the earlier surfing book, which had a political philosophy aspect of it. Because there I was saying that surfers are sort of on the vanguard of the leisure revolution, as I called it. So the product of, for a large part, surf culture is a product of the post-war era, where because of World War II, you had unprecedented reduction of poverty, low inequality. You had a relatively new work week, 40-hour work week. And so people had 8-hour work days and weekends off with periodic vacations. They had, and a little bit of money because they had okay jobs. And So for the first time in history, larger numbers of people, especially around here, Southern California, other beach places, they like had time. So they went to the beach and they'd hang out and do communal living and surf waves and develop new materials, use the expertise from aerospace industry, like engineers doing new surf craft and stuff like that. And so this global, like international, especially through not just California, but like Hawaii and Australia, South Africa, like this global surf culture started to emerge. A key moment is the movie Endless Summer there, which sort of catalyzed the idea that this was a global thing, surf travel. And then that sort of created this whole next generation of surfers that went out and did unconventional forms of living. They rejected the 40-hour work week. They didn't want to work for the man or whatever, and they did. A lot of it started with illegal activity, running drugs through in surfboards and stuff like that. Here at Laguna Beach, where I am, was one of the.
Think about that great story, right? Like that's a heck of a story.
Yeah, it was one of the largest drug trafficking rings in the history of the world up to the time. Like Orange Sunshine was one of their like LSD, the one Jimi Hendrix used, and this whole era is like surfers were a lot of that were behind that. So that's the darker side of it. But there was a lot of it went legit and became the surf industry. So they're sort of always been on the vanguard of of making good on the American dream, right? How do you have enough money and and freedom so that you can pursue whatever your form of happiness is, which is maybe something in nature, with friends, with people. It could be creative pursuits, things like that. And then that's kind of the dream of the golden years of the post-war era, where the idea that's the closest like any country has ever really come in some sense up to the time that it got branded in that way. Surf culture is emblematic of it. Skate culture, further, all these leisure cultures that came out of it reflect it. But then sort of since then, at least definitely in the United States, we've sort of lost track of how to actually make that a reality, right? And so how do you reboot the social contract so that you can make good on promises of shared prosperity, where there's meaningful enough work balanced with enough leisure time, so you don't have to, you can, and what we have got a little bit more of after COVID, which was pretty amazing to me watching it happen, was more flexibility in work, which is a good thing. That's really been, I think that's a lifesaver for a lot of people. But so how do you finance all this? How do you make all this work? And like, I think there's lots of possibilities for use of public banking and new forms of public central banking, especially public development banking, are really a crucial piece. And to understand how that's possible, you have to understand what money is. It's just a kind of promise. We can make them as long as they're well allocated. You're disciplining them the right way. That's non-inflationary. And so this is a way you finance basically the renewed, revived leisure capitalist social contract, as I call it.
Which has utterly convinced me, by the way. So I now use leisure capitalism. I'm like, no, that's the goal. And so what is it we need to do is create spaces where that kind of, Nietzschean revaluation of value is possible. And I've gotten a lot of critiques for camping with Kierkegaard, where people will say, sure, it'd be great to go to the mountains and camp and spend more time, out in the nature, if only I were a full tenured professor, if only I had the privilege that you occupy. And I think I get it. Like, that's a fair critique. But what I often say back is, right, but what I'm suggesting is the vision of what should be the call that motivates us to rethink our social policy. Like, if we haven't created this kind of flexibility, whatever that looks like for individuals, right? I mean, I'm guessing, Aaron, like, we're going to talk in a little bit about beach or mountains. Like, my hunch is beach for you always is going to be priority. For me, it's just hot. It reminds me of working construction, right? I always want to be in the mountains. So we can radically disagree about where our finitude is best spent, what story is the one we want to tell. But unless we are giving people that ability for leisure, Nick, you talked about being in a city and just like exploring it, man, like most people can't even get like to the little tiny towns 30 minutes away because of the schedules and the requirements. And it requires having transportation and then flexible income to be able to spend while you're like little tiny mundanities of human existence become crucial when we think about something like the meaning of life and what it looks like to live well. So Nick, you hit this general idea of this like rethinking social spaces in your book on Being Awesome. When you talk about awesomeness is creating social openings for other people to kind of express themselves, tell their stories in their instance, in ways that don't have to fit a very particular social script, right? They can surprise us and then invite us to kind of be down with them in those novel ways.
Yeah.
Do you think that that kind of opening, that kind of opportunity is made more likely or less likely in a time of like influencer culture? I made an argument a couple of weeks ago on the podcast that influencer culture has made it nearly impossible for us to find those openings, because almost always that how many likes can I get, how many clicks can I get is then dictating what like my 15-year-old son thinks is what he should be doing. And I actually see it like limiting some of what I would hope would be his novel expression of awesomeness. So do you think that this is easier, harder? Where are we at?
I mean, it's a little hard for me to assess. From my point of view, another activity I like to do with my kids now that I'm a dad is just play with them. Yeah. And there's a lot of awesomeness there in this like kind of newfangled sense that I talk about in the book. But yeah, and also from my point of view, as I walk around town and, do my daily things, and I feel like there's a lot of opportunities to try to create social openings. But I see what you're saying. I mean, if our teenagers are on their phones a lot, like looking through TikTok and, thinking of themselves and their reactions and inclinations and desires in terms of, what other people are doing on those platforms, that can be really limiting, right? It can make you, I think, less likely to see the social opening when it happens, and to know sort of spontaneously how to take it up in an authentic way, because you might be too self-conscious, right? You might be worried about how this might look, or so yeah. I mean, that does seem like a genuine worry, but I don't know how real it is. I mean, I don't have a good sense of that. Like, I don't have teenagers. I'm 43. Like, but yeah, it's hard to say.
No, it makes sense. I mean, so I recently took my son to his first live concert, and we would have done this years ago, but for COVID. And I was a professional session drummer for a whole lot of years before, becoming an academic. And so I wanted to start him in a space where, and this will sound weird, where none of his friends would think it was cool. And so I took him to a hardcore show. Like, I wanted him to go really experience what it's like we went and saw Norma Jean, and then POD was the headliner, but I was actually way more stoked for him to see Norma Jean, because these guys came out and, got there early. We're standing next to the barricade, and, they have the drum loop kind of starting the show, and the lead singer puts his foot out on the barricade and then drops down and starts just screaming. And the whole place loses its mind. And so watching my, at the time, 14-year-old son, like, not know how to make sense of the chaos that just ensued was really cool, because then 60 seconds later, dude's headbanging like with the pit, right? And it was like, this is so slick, because then what's he want? He wants the Norma Jean shirt and the POD shirt. And now he's wearing this at his school as a way of saying, this is so cool. Because up to that point, everything he wore, everything he did was all reflecting, oh, well, that's what the kids are wearing. And so for me, music became this kind of opportunity for him to express, maybe he doesn't have to like what I like, right? But the idea that the first show was not just, Taylor Swift or whatever it is that everybody else was going to get excited about. It allowed him to be excited about something that he had to explain to others. And I thought that was a baller way of drawing him into his own awesomeness, but we'll see what it yields. So
that's great.
Anyway.
Yeah, you don't see too many like moshing trend videos on TikTok.
Not a lot, right? Though you do see some weird extreme music used as like background for TikTok viral trends, which is bizarre to me. They'd never listened to this, but they like it, behind the scenes, right? Which I think is really cool. So before we transition to our quick commercial and then come back and talk about camping for a few minutes to close out, I would love both of you to maybe, like, Nick, you teach, but you're also a father. Aaron, when you're standing in front of your students, like, what is it you're trying to communicate to them? Not so much about like, this is what the meaning of life is, right? I've read y'all's books. This isn't the way that any of us talk about it. It's not like, there it is. This is what you should do. But what is it you're expressing to them as the invitation that you hope they will take up in whatever way they choose to be worthy of their life, their finitude? How do you express that invitation? How do you get 18-year-olds excited about not just being, lame people doing what everybody else does? Aaron, we'll start with you. Like, how do you get them excited to live philosophically, to live faithfully?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm trying to get them to live to do anything. I mean, in the first instance, I want them to like understand Plato if I'm teaching Plato's Gorgias or whatever, like this text, like, and these ideas. But maybe I do it in a way that like brings my own sense of like play or enjoyment, in engaging it, like, because it's as a creative activity. And then in that sense, the way in which like the ideas are sort of live and real and relevant and livable and important, as opposed to just so much scholarship that you should have to master. I suppose I bring that to the teaching. That's something I try to do in the pop books, I mean, I guess maybe the connection between teaching and writing popular philosophy is a sense that philosophy belongs to everybody. It's part of human culture, and it's a really important part of human culture, but it's entrusted to academics and universities. And then we do logic games with it, which I love, right? But that's a very small, like we chip away and at glacial speeds, we make progress, but like there's got to be a payoff along the way for the larger public. And so I feel a sense of responsibility to make it available for us to appreciate how awesome it is, like in Nick's sense of awesome, and so I guess a way of doing that, being off script about it or finding creative ways to sort of to communicate, explain, develop, whatever, I'll do that,
It's cool. Yeah. I will say my temptation often is to just try to get students to realize you're already doing philosophy. You just may not have the categories and the vocabulary to make sense of it that way. And so like feeling like I'm inviting them to re-narrate what they're already up to rather than having to them, like buy some new thing. It's like, nah, y'all are already worried about loss and grief. You're already wrestling with embarrassment and fitting in. You're already navigating questions of, the meaning of life. It's just you tend to talk about it like, hey, what are you majoring in and what are you going to do with that? Like the way we've narrated these philosophical questions is just kind of lame. Maybe we can expand that out. And that's where I tend to get a lot of traction. What about you, Nick? How do you tend to, whether your kids or your students, how do you kind of invite them to live a life that you hope they will be proud to have lived?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to Aaron, I guess I don't feel like that's my charge quite so much. I mean, I always have a goal with all of my classes to lead the students into a love of thinking in the way that philosophy cultivates that. And I try to lead by example. So I just try to be that like genuinely excited, interested, curious, inquisitive, sharp mind that they can see in action in the moment, and invite them to engage. And that takes not just demonstration on my side, but also kind of hand-holding them, and also a kind of openness and boldness on their part. Like they're all anxious and unsure of their talents, and kind of it's all quite foreign to them. And so even in my upper division classes, I try to do the same thing, which is there might be some topic, philosophy of poetry or aesthetics or value theory or whatever I'm teaching. I'm always kind of trying to do the same thing, which is not just teach them a topic, but lead by example in helping them engage in what I think of philosophy as a kind of, in some ways, a kind of atelic communal activity of thinking together. And we have our rules, we have our norms, we have our, in some sense, some of our goals. But I don't think of those goals as like convergence on a view. I think of them as just like exploration of conceptual space in ways that kind of in unpredictable ways that affect our lives, where the proof is in the pudding. I mean, Did you read that text? Did it blow your mind? I mean, did the concept of a social opening just kind of change the way you think about the way you order a coffee? Like, if so, then I think we've done cool philosophy together.
I love that.
Yeah, so that's kind of my approach, no matter what I'm teaching.
Yeah, my version of that, which I do not think everybody should adopt or even works for everybody, but this is a post-COVID change for me, is I stopped holding office hours. And instead, I give all of my students my cell number, which again, I'm not suggesting everyone should do that. If I had small kids, I would not do that.
Nope.
But the idea of it was to say, hey, y'all, like, I will be here when we are meeting on purpose. Like, let's both be invested in this, and I will be fully present and fully invested in that conversation with you. But I'm not just going to hang out at the office. I'm going to go get my work done and then be on a trout stream, or hopefully shredding some mountain bike trails, or being with my elderly father who currently has cancer. Like, these are things like I'm trying to model for you. You don't have to spend your whole life at the office. But I then will tell them, different times of life, the office might be a amazing space that gives you respite from the amount of other things that are calling on your time. Like you say, I got 9 to 4. Like that's where I got to be at the office and get the work done. Both of these can work, and showing students there are different models. Like Aaron, you say there are meanings of life, not just one singular thing. And it's been cool because students initially were like, there's no office hours, how do we meet? And it turns out we meet probably more than we did before. It's just that they now take seriously, they are calling on my time to meet, and I am honoring theirs when we do, right? Like it's this kind of mutual agreed upon existential recognition that our lives matter. It's not just I am the employee waiting, for the customer to come through at these periods. It's been kind of cool to see what modeling that different approach to even what the office means looks like. So yeah, I'm down with that. Well, let's do this. We're going to take a very quick break for a commercial. We're going to come back and do a speed round, questions about camping, and then make sure we get Nick off so he can go pick up his kids.
I hope you are enjoying Campfire Philosophy. I would like to take a moment to thank Planksip for sponsoring the show. Daniel Sanderson is the guy behind that media outlet, and he is a fellow lover of philosophy. So if you get a chance, head over to planksip.org. That's PLANKSIP.org. If you sign up for their ideal plan and use the offer code AARON, that's AARON, you will get 50% off for the first 6 months. Free book publishing and lots more. Go check them out. And thanks so much to Daniel and Planksip for sponsoring Campfire Philosophy. Now, back to the show.
As always, thanks to Planksip. Really appreciate what they've been doing and allowing Campfire Philosophy with Aaron Simmons to occur. All right, guys, y'all have been amazing. We end all of our shows with 5 questions about campfires and camping. And so we're going to do that now. My hunch is that some of your answers are a little bit more predictable since we haven't yet had, surfers and LA born people here. But first question, Nick, we'll start with you. Beach or mountains?
It's really hard for me, man. I live in San Diego.
That's the best.
I can go from one to the other. It's like, I mean, it's harvest season for the grapes, so I'll say mountains.
Love it.
But it's also perfect beach weather too, so whatever. Both.
That's fantastic. And I live in a place in South Carolina where I can get to both. I'm like 45 minutes from some of the best mountain biking trails in the world, and I'm more like 3.5, 4 hours from like Charleston. So it's possible. But I grew up in Florida, and so it turns out the beach for me really does kind of just bring back like PTSD about working construction and being hot, and why would I want to sweat this much? So I'm always a mountains guy, but my wife, she's a beach lady. Aaron, what about you?
A beach, as long as you mean ocean and not like being hot and sweaty on sandy at midday. That I don't like at all in the slightest. But the ocean is.
I think that's and if I knew how to surf, so Aaron, you and I, like, we need to get together so you can teach me to surf and I'll take you mountain biking. And I think you will definitely help me appreciate the family beach trips. All right. Second question. So when you are sitting there by the campfire, which of course can happen at the beach or in the mountains, right? What is your preferred drink? My 3 options that I give are hot chocolate, coffee, or tea. but maybe Nick, wine is the right answer tonight. I don't know. What do you think, Aaron?
What time of day is it? Is this? I really have to know. Yeah,
whatever you prefer.
Let's see. Well, I'll go with like at the after surf in Sumatra where I go to surf. The after surf bintang is sort of traditional for Australians, Americans. That's Indonesian beer. So go with that.
Nice, love it. Nick, what about you?
Yeah, I would do wine or mezcal. Yeah, those would be the two.
Oh, so y'all are way fancier than my, like Swiss Miss hot chocolate with hopefully
Bintang, there's nothing fancy about bintang.
It sounds fancy. All right. So you're drinking your bintang, you're drinking your mezcal. What is your favorite, and Nick, we'll start with you since you are the cook here. What is your favorite campfire food other than s'mores?
Grilled cheese.
Oh, that's a great answer.
Yeah, my friend, this is just based on my friend Scott. He camps a lot, and whenever he goes camping, he does a grilled cheese in the morning, and it's brilliant. Highly recommended.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love it. I've never made one of those over the campfire, but that is now on my, I'm going camping this weekend. That is gonna happen. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Aaron, what about you? What food do you like by the campfire?
I don't know. I guess I should go with my South African friends who love to braai, which is basically cooking over open fire. Like all about the. And I don't eat that much meat, but they are all about cooking meat over campfire. So that's a specialty when you're with your South African friends. Yeah.
By far, the most popular answer so far this season has been hot dogs. And like, I don't eat beef or pork, but I do eat turkey and stuff. And I'm like, even turkey dogs, which don't taste nearly as good as real hot dogs, they still taste way better over the campfire. So yeah, there's something about that, like fiery spit juices reality that just makes all of it taste better. So love it. All right. You both, my hunches. I mean, Nick, rather, I've seen your like early press video, flying off things, and it has, all this kind of punk music behind it and stuff. So let's move from, we've got our campfire, we are sitting there with our drink, we've got our food roasting. What's the song you hope the, person who brought the guitar starts playing? So Nick, what's the song you want played there at the campfire?
Oh man. I don't know. That's hard. I've been listening to a lot of pop music, so it's not not real campfire music. Maybe I would go with Adrienne Lenker. She's the lead singer of Big Thief.
Nice.
She has a couple of solo albums, and they're good. They're really good, kind of desert campfire songs. And I like camping in the desert, so
love it.
I'll go with Adrienne Lenker. If I had to pick a specific song, that'd be hard. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I actually don't know her work, but I will definitely check that out. Aaron, what about you? What
song popped into my head when you said it, so maybe that's more of a tropic, which is this always, but like, don't worry about a thing,
Yeah, love it. So you got somebody playing the guitar with a steel drum like nearby. Yeah. I like that. And Aaron, Nick, I don't know if I told you this or not, but one of the things that I have absolutely found to be the most helpful reality about being a parent when Atticus was like just barely born was Bob Marley's Buffalo Soldier is 60 beats per minute. And so it turns out if you are bouncing your kid at Buffalo Soldier tempo, there's some data that suggests it's the same average gait of a pregnant woman. And so it actually, I found, made my son like immediately to sleep. Oh, wow. So there's something about Buffalo Soldier that remains heroic. Those early days being a parent. So last question.
My kids are already doing dance parties to Chapel Roan, so we're off on a different level.
Coolest kid. And one of your kids is named Wolf, isn't it? Isn't that right? Yeah, that's such, oh my gosh, what a cool name. My son is named Atticus, which I also like, but Wolf was a really close tie. All right, last question we're going to call tonight. So you're at the campfire, you're drinking, eating, listening to music. Which philosopher, alive or dead, do you want sitting next to you at the campfire? Aaron, we'll start with you.
Wittgenstein. Yeah, just to trip out.
Oh, what a great answer. Oh my gosh. Nick, what about you?
I feel like Wittgenstein would be miserable.
Yeah, he's kind of an asshole.
Gosh, that's a hard question. I'm one of these lame guests who just wants to ponder this question for like 20 minutes before I answer.
That reaction, I guess.
You ever see Harry Frankfurt on The Daily Show?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He gets asked the question. He's like, And Jon Stewart's like, you got to answer, dude.
We have a commercial, man. Come on.
But yeah, no. Well, my one of my big heroes is Friedrich Schiller, and he would have probably be a pretty good campfire guest.
Yeah, that'd have been fun.
Yeah, so I'll go with him.
He just would probably keep calling you naive and sentimental all night, though. So, well, my choice tonight, and again, to everybody watching, this is the last regular episode of season 1. There will be some extra bonus episodes happening throughout the fall that will primarily be available for paid subscribers on my Substack, Philosophy in the Wild. You can get to it straight through Substack or at jaaronsimmons.com. So if you'd like to see more of this cool content throughout the fall, definitely go get a paid subscription at Philosophy in the Wild. But in all seriousness, y'all, like, I want to go camping with both of you. And Aaron, I want you to show me how to surf. Nick, I absolutely want to let you cook and watch how you do it. And my goodness, that would be absolutely hilariously fun. And so I hope we get a chance to do that together, y'all.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Good.
Well, thank you all so much. To everybody else, thank you for an amazing first season of Campfire Philosophy with Aaron Simmons. Thanks to Dan Sanderson for all of his work supporting it and producing the show. Go over to planksip.org and get involved in what they're doing. It is some wonderful stuff. Nick, Aaron, make sure you send it always. And thanks for inviting everybody else to live lives full of meaning. Thanks to everybody.
Pleasure.
On the trail, for hiking with me a few miles more, for casting out your line into waters in which we both stand, for dropping in at the top and fist bumping me at the bottom, and for coming camping with me and Kierkegaard. Our time together has been so very